The blazing Texas heat couldn't keep thousands of spectators away from Jacksboro in the summer of 1871, all drawn by the promise of witnessing legal history unfold. In a land where violence had become as common as tumbleweeds, this particular murder trial would shatter every precedent. Case number 224, split into two dramatic proceedings on July 5th and 6th, was destined to become the most talked-about courtroom drama of the century. Standing in the shadow of the gallows were two Kiowa warriors, Satanta and Big Tree, about to face something no Native American had ever encountered: judgment by white civilian law. In northwest Texas, a blood-soaked frontier where Indian incursions had left people aching for retribution, the odds were stacked against them. But here lay the bitter irony: while justice might be blind, guilt was not, and both men had undeniably committed the brutal crimes that brought them to this historic moment. Satanta, approximately 50 to 55 years old, and Big Tree, around 19 to 20, departed their reservation near Fort Sill in Indian Territory alongside Medicine Man, Mamonte, Satank, and other tribal members. The war party positioned themselves on Salt Creek Prairie, situated between Belknap and Jacksboro, and lay in wait. Following Mamonte's prophetic guidance, the group allowed a military ambulance with its mounted escort to pass safely on May 17th. The next day, as storm clouds gathered overhead, the raiders struck a convoy of 10 wagons pulled by 12 teamsters transporting corn. These men worked for Captain Henry Warren, who held a government contract for delivering provisions to remote military outposts. From the Kiowa perspective, the assault yielded reasonable results. Though they sustained some losses, the warriors captured 41 mules, various goods, and took 6 scalps. 7 teamsters perished, though one victim was hairless. The military ambulance that Mamonte had allowed to pass unmolested on May 17th carried a notable figure: General William T. Sherman, who was conducting an inspection tour of the Indian frontier en route to Fort Richardson at Jacksboro. 2 surviving teamsters, one being the injured Thomas Braziel, managed to trek 20 miles through rainfall to alert authorities about the assault. Upon hearing Braziel's account, Sherman immediately commanded Colonel Ranald S. Mackenzie of the 4th Cavalry to track down the raiders. Sherman then proceeded to Fort Sill, where he collaborated with Lori Tatum, a Quaker Indian agent wrestling with moral concerns, and Colonel Benjamin Grierson's 10th Cavalry to apprehend Satanta, Big Tree, and Satank following Satanta's confession of participating in the attack. Mamonte successfully evaded Sherman's dragnet. Sherman and Tatum both felt that threatening the Native Americans with execution would reduce incursions into Texas territory. Sherman declared that these 3 individuals must never be permitted freedom again, writing that if the Indian Department refused to hand them over to a Texas court, military tribunal proceedings would be preferable. He believed that releasing them back to their tribes would endanger every life from Kansas down to the Rio Grande. Mackenzie reached the fort on June 4th and left with his 3 Kiowa captives 4 days afterward. Riding in the front wagon sat the chief of the Coyet Senko Warrior Society, Satank, whom a correspondent from the Army and Navy Journal characterized as a gray-haired old villain around 60 years old, aged in wickedness and bloodshed. Wrapping himself in a blanket, Satank started chanting his death song. With a blade he had obtained and using his teeth, the warrior worked himself loose from his shackles. Within a mile of the fort, he stabbed a guard with the weapon and seized a rifle before soldiers gunned him down, choosing, as one newspaper reported, to perish as a warrior rather than enter the afterlife through a coward's death by hanging. On June 15th, Mackenzie's cavalry troops and their 2 remaining captives reached Jacksboro amid cheering from military personnel and townspeople, accompanied by music from the military band. At the fort, Big Tree and Satanta were imprisoned. However, not all parties appeared enthusiastic about the upcoming historic trial. 8 attorneys, among them Samuel W. T. Lanham and Thomas Ball, submitted a petition to Judge Charles Seward of the 13th Judicial District, asking that proceedings be moved from Jacksboro due to Native American dangers in the area. The request was rejected. Lanham took on the prosecution role while Ball joined the defense team when court convened in the 2-story courthouse on July 1st. Big Tree and Satanta were formally charged on July 4th with the murders of the 7 wagon drivers. Legal proceedings commenced the next day. Classes were canceled, and crowds packed into the courthouse's upper level where the proceedings would take place. Satanta and Big Tree were transported from Fort Richardson in a military-escorted wagon to prevent anyone from attacking the defendants. Court began at 8:30 a.m. The defense initially argued that Texas lacked jurisdiction to prosecute the Kiowas since Native Americans fell under federal guardianship. Judge Soward dismissed this claim, but approved the defense's subsequent request to conduct separate trials. Bigtree's case would proceed first. Ball began with an appeal for mercy. The Dallas Herald observed that his arguments were sometimes highly eloquent, demonstrating both comprehensive understanding of Native American nature and establishing Ball as a skilled speaker. In the sweltering courtroom, he shed his jacket while recounting injustices committed against indigenous peoples dating back to Spanish conquest. He concluded by urging the jury to allow Satanta and Bigtree to soar away as free and unrestricted as an eagle. When Fort Sill interpreter Horace Jones translated this for the Kiowa defendants, they responded with approving grunts and nods. The prosecution called Jones, Colonel Mackenzie, Teamster Braziel, Sergeant Miles Verily, and agency interpreter Matthew Leeper to the stand. Braziel described the assault to jurors, Verily confirmed that Kiowa arrows were recovered from the scene, and Leeper, speaking for Indian Agent Tatum, recounted how Satanta had openly bragged about commanding the attack. Defense attorneys Ball and Joseph A. Woolfolk posed minimal questions and presented no witnesses. By mid-afternoon, final arguments were set to begin. While Ball had captivated the audience with his opening remarks, Prosecutor Lanham would deliver an equally powerful conclusion. This stands as an unprecedented and momentous trial, possibly without equal in the annals of American criminal law, he opened. Any pretense of restraint and civility vanished from that point forward. Lanham painted a vivid portrait of the defendant's savage and primitive demeanor, emphasizing the severity of the charges, the mounting death toll, and the horrific brutality and inhuman butchery visited upon the corpses. He branded Satanta as the master devil of betrayal and bloodshed, the one who incites his comrades to pillage and slaughter, while describing Bigtree as a demon beast who has developed a taste for blood and craves it like sustenance, who shrinks from no atrocity, no matter how vile. The jury deliberated for just 30 minutes before returning with a conviction. The court recessed until the next day for Satanta's trial. The evidence and witness accounts remained largely identical. However, Jones's testimony, as the Dallas Herald reported, proved more damning and unambiguous than the case against Bigtree, since Satanta had boldly declared to his tribe before his capture, "Let no war leader take credit for slaying those 7 Texans. I am the great chief who carried out that killing." This time, the stakes shifted dramatically as the defendant chose to speak for himself. Rising to address the court, Satanta delivered his plea in Comanche, with Jones translating his desperate words. "My own people have turned against me, calling me a fool for befriending the white man. I have always championed peace above all else. I have dreamed of this land flourishing under white settlement. This marks my first encounter with Texans face to face. You don't know who I truly am, just as I am a stranger to you. Spare my life and I swear I possess the influence to control my warriors. Kill me, and you'll ignite a wildfire across the plains that no force on earth can extinguish." Satanta's voice rang with conviction as he vowed to maintain peace if freed, even promising to personally eliminate any war-hungry Kiowa leaders who threatened that peace. Yet the jury remained unmoved, delivering a guilty verdict and condemning him to the hangman's rope. The most sensational legal spectacle of the era had concluded, but its aftermath would prove equally dramatic. Under mounting political heat and genuine terror that executing the Kiowa leaders would unleash a bloody frontier war, Judge Soward penned an urgent letter to Governor Edmund J. Davis on July 10th, desperately urging him to spare the condemned men's lives in favor of permanent imprisonment. Bigtree and Satanta were both cuffed and heading for the imposing walls of Huntsville State Penitentiary by October 16th after Davis gave in to the pressure. The trial's legal players scattered to pursue their destinies. Along the Brazos River, Woolfolk discreetly resumed his legal practice while growing his cattle and farming business. Ball's career soared. He eventually claimed seats as both state senator and Texas assistant attorney general, but it was prosecutor Lanham who rode the trial's fame all the way to the governor's mansion, ruling Texas from 1903 to 1907 as the final Confederate war veteran to hold that distinguished office. Freedom came unexpectedly in 1873 when both warriors received parole. An enraged Sherman fired off a blistering warning to Governor Davis. "Mark my words, Satanta and Bigtree will exact their vengeance if they haven't already, and when they come for scalps, yours should be the first to fall." Yet Bigtree confounded all expectations by embracing peaceful transformation. He earned honest wages working supply trains, helped found the Rainy Mountain Indian Mission, and in 1897 converted to Christianity, faithfully serving as a church deacon until his peaceful death in 1929. Satanta, however, chose a vastly different path. The fighter entered the brutal Red River War of 1874 to 1875 with his blood still blazing hot. When the smoke cleared and he finally laid down his weapons in defeat, the iron gates of Huntsville slammed shut behind him once again. Other Kiowa chiefs, such as Mamonti, the real mastermind behind the Warren wagon train slaughter, also met their terrible ends. Thus he wasn't the only one suffering retribution. Mamonti found himself exiled to the suffocating confines of Fort Marion in St. Augustine, Florida, where tuberculosis claimed his life in 1875. Prison walls became Satanta's tomb long before his death. His once mighty frame withered, his spirit crushed under the weight of permanent captivity. When officials coldly informed him that freedom would never come, his response echoed with the dignity of a broken but unbroken warrior. "I refuse to waste away and perish like a chained dog." The next morning, October 11th, 1878, he slashed his own flesh and was rushed to the prison infirmary's second floor. In a moment of solitude, he seized his final act of defiance, hurling himself from the landing to embrace death on his own terms. The ripple effects of this historic trial reached far beyond two Kiowa lives. It became the death knell for the Quaker peace policy on reservations and hastened the complete subjugation of the Kiowa nation. Countless raids inflicted far greater carnage and destruction than the assault on Henry Warren's wagon train on May 18, 1871, yet none triggered such sweeping and lasting consequences.